This happened to me over the last year or so, and it's something I thought I would take to my grave. Just thinking about it, thinking about the horrible stuff that I helped cause, it makes me feel violently ill. I feel like a monster. I hope that at least by exposing this, even if I end up dead, I can at least help someone. I hope it will stop the people who engineered this from going completely unpunished. I was out in the field on a joint operation, which was a collaboration between the CIA and the US Army. I am a soldier, a trained combat medic. I wasn't in the general US Army by this point. The CIA often works alongside paramilitary units that are specialized for certain missions. The mission that we were undergoing, I thought I was going to be doing something good for once. You see, the CIA and the government of a country that I am not going to be naming agreed to a deal. The CIA wanted to test some new experimental medications and vaccines before moving on to human trials in the USA. The idea was that people in rural areas of the country who would not otherwise have access would receive free medication and medical treatments. Now, this might sound really screwed up from the jump, and I guess it was. We were using these people as human guinea pigs because the US government deemed them as lesser and not as important as US citizens. I guess I just tried to spin the narrative in my mind in order to justify it. I guess I just tried telling myself that we were saving these people from diseases that would kill children, that would kill them otherwise, that they would have no way to protect themselves from and fight off. Diseases that would devastate entire communities and reduce life expectancy by a vast number. What I just explained to you right there is essentially how it was fed to me. And I agreed to it, using those same justifications inside my mind. Once we touched down, we were assigned to this small rural village in the middle of nowhere. They had no real kind of technology, no kind of proper medical care, and even education and school was very limited. People were living in horrible conditions. They would have to walk miles to fetch water that might be riddled with parasites and bacteria, with no kind of equipment or know-how to sterilize this water. The food that they had access to, that was just whatever little food they could scavenge up, along with what they were able to grow off of the land. If they were lucky, they might own an animal or two that they could either use to live off or sell the produce in order to buy other food at like a market somewhere or something. It was a horrible situation that I hoped deep in my heart we could make better. We were given a pretty lengthy briefing beforehand, before we even made any contact, about what specifically we will be administering to these people, the rules of engagement with the locals, and our assigned duties. To sum it up, each day I would be given food and water and would be assigned to a specific set of villagers. I was told that we were administering medication to help combat malaria with very few side effects. It was apparently even more effective than any other medication and apparently had no side effects almost. It was this along with a few other medications. Alongside that, we had vaccines to administer that we were told would help protect the mother and her newborn children. The aim was to vastly decrease the number of infant deaths and stillborns, etc. I did not develop these drugs, obviously, and they were still in the trial phase, so even though I was a trained combat medic, I was only really fed technical jargon. The explanations for me were more of a, it does this and stops this, rather than a full chemical breakdown. I also just want to specify that as a combat medic, I do not have the same level of expertise as a doctor with a PhD. My level of expertise is more in line with that of an EMT or a paramedic. After your 10 weeks of basic, you get shoved through a series of 16 to 26 weeks of medical training, depending on things like unit assignment and specialization. After this, you undergo overtraining at various points, usually totaling between 2 months and 7 months in total. If you're regularly deployed into active combat zones, which in the current year you probably are not, then you will be on the lower side of that. My job was basically to just check in on these same villagers every single day, have conversations with them, build up a rapport and a sense of trust, check for any side effects, monitor vitals and take blood, etc. The more they trusted us, the easier it would be to find out symptoms and other things and test how effective the medication and vaccines are becoming. I think the villagers also had a briefing beforehand, and I was told that they all consented to the work. I think we were framed as providing humanitarian aid rather than being soldiers administering tests. There was this one family, just a mother and a father, and they had a little boy. I'm not sure how old, but he was young. He could talk, but not fully. They were delighted with my presence, to say the least. I sat for hours listening to her stories, talking to me about how many babies she had lost, about how my presence was a blessing from the Lord, that I was sent personally by Him to help keep her babies alive and safe. If I wasn't on duty and did not need to show a brave face, I would have bawled my eyes out. At times, I felt the taste of guilt that I had to push deep down and hide away. But deep in my core, I prayed that these medications and vaccines would do the trick. I would sit and entertain their son while giving him the injection. The face he made when he saw me just carrying regular old bread, you would have thought it was Christmas. His face lit up. He ran laps around the room. Everyone I met was so welcoming and grateful. These people welcomed me into their homes and treated me like a good friend. They shared their personal stories with me and trusted me with them. And I sat and I listened, and I'd like to think I gave them the respect and the reverence that they deserved. I continued on the same exact routine for a couple of days, maybe even about a week before any side effects of the medications started to show. One day I went in, and the son I mentioned, he looked seriously under the weather, and his parents looked quite frightened. He'd developed these big lumps all over his body. They were spaced out along his arms, and he had others on his back. They were large and red, and they looked seriously sore. One on his back looked to be infected and was leaking this pus. I laid their son down and treated him as best as I could. Just for reference, I was not really allowed to take any serious action before reporting back. I was supposed to take notes, radio in, and then wait for a response, which I did this time. I was told to give him something else, which they told me was for the side effects that they provided me with at the first briefing. I recommended he stay in bed and drink plenty of water, of which I provided. I tried to comfort the boy, told him he needed to eat the food I gave so that his body was strong enough to fight it off. I explained to the parents how this happens sometimes with vaccines, about how your body fights a weak version so it's strong enough to fight the real thing. I explained it in a way that made sure that the young boy could understand too, so he was less afraid. They seemed really reassured at my explanation. It seemed to really resonate with them. They thanked me for my help. They asked if I would gather around their son's bed and say a prayer with them. I'm not religious myself, but I would have felt like an asshole saying no, so I obliged. And then I left, and I moved on with the day. It wasn't until a few days after that I realized that what we were doing was seriously messed up, that it was wrong, and that we never should have been there, because I witnessed a horrifying sight that I know I will never ever be able to push out of my head. I walked into that house. The boy was running around the house. He seemed to be bursting with energy. He seemed so much better. He was so happy and laughing and gleeful. I pretended to chase him around the room and asked what had gotten into him. And then I went into the bedroom of the parents to check on them. I saw them lying on the bed. The door was wide open and they were lifeless on the bed. I checked their pulses immediately, and it was clear that they were dead. The bodies they looked horrible. Their faces looked to have been becoming emaciated, like they'd been starved of food for a while, but it was like their faces had become gaunt overnight. They were perfectly healthy just the day before. The mother had these really stressed veins on her face, on her cheeks and near her neck. The veins were unusually thick, and they were a deep purple color. They were so thick, they looked as if they would burst just from a scratch. I think the worst part was probably the eyeballs. They were not fully solid anymore is the only way I can put it. The eyeballs had almost partially melted into the sockets and had become more of a runny mess. I was wearing sanitary medical gloves, and I was able to confirm this with my fingers. The second that I felt what my eyes were seeing, I almost pulled away and retched right there. In all of my career, in all of my medical expertise, I had never seen anything quite like this. The father, his eyes, they were pretty much the same. I was furiously writing notes and trying to contact my superiors on the radio. I made sure to take pictures in order to document what happened, but their son, he ran into the room. I tried to stop him, but he just had so much energy and would not stop running around. He didn't even really seem to understand the situation. He grabbed his mother's hand and was shaking her arm back and forth, telling me with a big grin that they had been playing all morning. He told me that it was the best day ever and that he had never played so much, that his parents were usually so serious and so busy. He climbed up onto the bed and started jumping up and down, and the force of it was vibrating and shifting the bodies. I had to reach over and grab him and pull him out of the room. He fought me. He got mad at me when I closed the door. He asked me why I was being so mean and not letting him play. I told him in a kid-friendly way that his parents were sick and they needed peace and quiet in order to get better. I told him it was just like him. They just needed a little bit of time and a little bit of rest. I mean, I couldn't exactly tell him the truth. I took him by the hand and walked into my superiors. They had not answered me on the radio. I put the kid into another room while we spoke so that he did not hear. I told them everything from top to bottom, and my jaw dropped when they told me to just take him back to his house and leave him there. They told me that they would collect the body shortly, but that the kid had to remain there. I was furious, but I didn't even get a chance to fight it. I think they just saw it in my eyes, because before I could even start arguing my case, they told me that it was an order and that it was final. So I did what I was told. I led the kid back to his house. He was really quiet on the walk back. He seemed to have lost the energy that he had just moments prior. When I got him through the door of the house, he just sat on the floor and told me that he didn't feel so good. I sat down with him. The kid was very clearly coming down with some kind of a fever. I took his temperature and it was sky high. I used my light to check his eyes. His eyes were completely bloodshot. In the bottom of his eyes, there was something in them. There was this kind of runny mucus-like substance that was slightly gelatinous that was pooling in the bottom of his eyes. It was just building up and was starting to ooze out. He couldn't stop rubbing and itching them and was complaining that it was hard to see and that the light hurt his eyes. I kept checking on him, trying to figure out what the hell was going on, trying to figure out what might be the cause of this, radioing back in for guidance, but I never received anything back from my superiors. At one point, I remembered that I turned around to grab some medical equipment from my bag, and then I heard a funk sound, and when I turned back around, the kid was just seizing on the floor. I did whatever I could for him. I tried to resuscitate him once the seizing had stopped, but it didn't work. He had no pulse. The kid was dead, just like his parents, and I had no idea what the cause was. Or at least, I didn't at the time. I had called him back up on the radio multiple times. I cried and begged and pleaded for extra medical assistance, but I did not even get the courtesy of a no. All I got in return was complete and utter silence, and it made me so angry. I wanted to give my superiors a piece of my mind. I didn't care if it lost me my job or if anything happened to me at this point. But I only got as far as turning the doorknob when I heard some thumping and then some shuffling, along with some kind of wheezing. The kid, I thought he was dead, but he had gotten up back onto his feet. He was rocking back and forth and looked like he could barely stand, let alone keep his balance. I started kneeling down, asking if he was okay, and he started running at me. I reached out to grab him and embrace him to try and comfort him, but he started trying to hurt me. He was flailing and kicking and punching, and he would not respond to anything that I said to him. All I could hear was him wheezing pretty heavily. He was using his fingers to try and claw at me and scratch me, but I managed to keep him at arm's length. At one point, he just started biting down on my arm. But my clothes, they were much too thick, and his teeth were not fully developed yet. So I didn't feel anything. He couldn't even pierce my jacket. I was begging him to stop, asking him what's wrong, but he just would not respond to me. At one point, I just pushed him away. It was only so he would get off of me and stop trying to attack me, but I think I pushed him a little bit too hard. He went into the wall with a lot more pace than I thought that I put into the push. He raised his arms at the last second to brace, but I heard a cracking sound. And when he got back up to his feet, I noticed that one of his fingers had snapped. It was completely crooked and looked so painful, but not once did he cry out or scream. He didn't even look at his finger, or really even notice it, if I'm honest. He just kind of shuffled off over to his parents' room at this point. I watched him jump on the bed. I watched him start biting at his mother's hands and scratching her instead. I honestly thought I'd lost my mind at this point, that nothing was real, that I was dreaming. Because I mean, how the hell could what I saw be real? At this point, there was a lot of chatter on the radio. A lot of other people reporting deaths and injuries and worsening symptoms. I couldn't even get through to anyone. I reported back to my superiors in person, and what they ordered me to do, it still haunts me to this day. They told me that I had to erase the child. They told me that the entire village was to be erased. They told me that I had to go back and kill that child because he was suffering, and because he was a risk of infection if I just left him. They ordered me to put him out of his misery. I was like, what? No, I am not doing that. And they told me in veiled terms that if I didn't do it, then I would be erased too. I didn't really get a lot of explanation for what was happening in the village or what was happening to these people. It was obvious I was lied to about the medication and the vaccines, but I still didn't really understand. It was the worst moment of my life. I had to walk through the door and look that child in the eyes. I had to look into the eyes of a child that I swore to protect, that I thought I was there to treat. I had to look at him as he crouched in front of his two dead parents who told me that I was a blessing from the Lord himself, and I had to put a bullet in his head. I just stood there, crying while holding the gun, with my hand just shaking violently. It took me a while, but I did it. I got it done. I didn't have to clean up the bodies. That was probably the only positive in that whole messed up situation. I didn't do any cleanup at all. I am 99% sure that every single person stationed in that place on duty was shipped back the same day. I went through a quarantine. I had medical tests ran on me, and then I went for a very lengthy debriefing. I still did not find anything out. To this day, I don't know exactly what we did, aside from the fact that it was evil. They relieved me of my duties. They brought up their concerns that they had with my insubordination. I was suspended indefinitely, but they promised that they would pay me while I was suspended. I was told that I would be paid pending an investigation into the situation and that I might be required to attend some hearings. I was forced to sign countless NDAs, and I was basically told, If you tell anyone what happened, we will make you go away. They, of course, never told me in those exact words. It was always just implied. And so, that's how it's been for the last, I don't even know how long. 6 months? Longer? I don't really keep track of the days anymore. I barely even leave my house. I've noticed these weird cars and other vehicles on my street for extended periods of time. They don't belong to any neighbors that I know, and they always stick around. I've noticed what I could swear are the same exact vehicles in different locations on the very rare occasion that I have left my house. Whenever I go into a store for groceries, I always notice some weirdo looking at me, taking pictures of me. Or the security guard will tail me through the entire store like he thinks I'm stealing something. I've gotten strange messages online without any prompting from me, trying to ask me questions and get me to talk about things. I think they're trying to trick me into talking so that they have a reason. I'm posting this here because it's clear that I am not going to be around for much longer. Someone needs to know. I am not going down without a fight. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. My uncle used to backpack alone for weeks in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California during the 1980s and the 1990s. For years, he never really thought much of the Bigfoot stories, as he had zero encounters despite hundreds of nights spent alone in fairly remote wilderness. This was until one night he said his campsite was attacked by what he described as what could have only been Bigfoot. Stones were thrown in the vicinity of his fire and sleeping bag. He had no tent. He said that he looked up, and at the edge of the light of his fire, which was about 30 feet, he saw a bipedal creature standing at about 7 feet tall with incredibly broad shoulders. He told me that he went to grab his ice axe, which was his only means of self-defense at the time, and as he stood up, he was so overcome with fear from this creature that his legs buckled underneath him, and he just collapsed to the ground. Now, my uncle is a fairly big dude. He is 6'4", 250 pounds, and had spent many nights alone in the wilderness. So, he's encountered everything the California wilderness has to offer. I'm talking bears, mountain lions, coyotes, etc. And for him to react like this, it has to mean something. This encounter still shakes him to this day, as he does not like to talk about it very much. However, shortly after the event, he was inspired to learn more about this creature and spent years searching. Funny thing is that my uncle was the person that introduced the shell that is Matt Moneymaker to the world of Bigfoot. Another interesting story about my uncle is that on one of his trips that he spent searching for Bigfoot, he stumbled upon large scat that he could not identify. He took a sample of said scat back with him and had it analyzed at UCLA. The scat was determined to be from a creature that could not be recognized. The people at the lab even accused my uncle of taking the shit. Funny enough, the scat sample mysteriously disappeared when he returned to the lab a few months later. My dad and my other uncle also had what they described as an unexplained experience involving what they now think was also Bigfoot. Being my dad and his brother, they were backpacking for the Sierra Nevada mountains at this time. It was late summer, and it's probably about 8 p.m. The sun is just about to set. Their trail comes along a large meadow. This meadow is filled with dozens of cattle. While they continue walking on while staring at this cattle, they hear this extremely loud whistle/howling sound. This cattle, at the sound of this, quickly rush into a defensive circle, with the young cows in the middle. At the time, they thought the noise was a cowboy call, as there was a ranch just a few miles down the trail. The cows continued staying in the formation as long as my dad and uncle are in view. My dad and uncle make camp about a mile further on. Fast forward to next morning. They continue hiking. They come across a ranch that they thought was open. The ranch is boarded up and closed for the season. Bigfoot could likely prey upon the younger cattle. Hearing that call and seeing my dad and my uncle, who are already 6'4", plus their large packs, in a low light situation, clearly startled the cows. Years later, my dad and I were watching some Bigfoot show on Discovery. While watching, the people on the show played recordings of Bigfoot howls. My dad said what he heard that day sounded eerily similar to this. This story happened to me a few years back, and I never really got over it. My buddy and I always meet in Burney, California, for an annual fishing trip at Iron Canyon nearby. I am driving up late at night. My buddy won't arrive until tomorrow, so I plan on getting to the hotel pretty late and just staying an extra night to wait for him. I stop in a nearby town for gas and to piss, and then prepare to drive the rest of the way there. I drive for probably around 10 minutes. It's about 10:30 p.m. at this point. I'm pretty hungry. I haven't eaten a thing since breakfast. I don't really want to turn back. I just have to wait until I get to Burney or find a gas station along the way. Lo and behold, I see a light up ahead. Hell yeah, maybe I can pick up some beef jerky. As I approach, I see that it's not a gas station, but a large supermarket. Think Safeway size. All the lights are on inside, so it must be open. There is no logo on the outside. There are no houses around. It's not in a town either. It isn't even on the outskirts of a town. It's really far away from the last town that I was in. Who cares? I want food, and it is open. Pick related. It's a shot of Burney from overhead. I pull up and park below one of the lamps in the parking lot. I get out and walk over to the store. It's summer, so it's not too cold outside. The doors open automatically, which is always fun. I enter, and it looks like a pretty nice place. It's well lit. The floors are all clean. There are vegetables to the left. There are a bunch of aisles to the right. I head to the aisles and start looking for some beef jerky. I really wanted some beef jerky. I find an aisle with a small selection of beef jerky. I grab one off the rack thing that it's on, but the bag is empty. Don't worry, this isn't the spooky part. The bag had been opened already. I check the other bags. Same thing. What the hell? Give me my goddamn beef. I take one of the bags up to the register. There is nobody at any of the registers. I realize that there is nobody in the entire store. The automatic doors open up at the front. I look over, but there is nothing. Nobody walks in. At this point, I'm not even scared. I'm just really confused. I decide it's already late enough and I should get to Burney at this point. I leave the bag on the conveyor belt and walk over to the entrance door. The store is entirely silent. There is no music playing or anything. I can't even hear the hum of refrigerators or whatever. I sort of feel a bit spooked, but I have a pretty large knife in my pocket, so that makes me feel a little bit better. There is no danger present either way. But the fact that nobody is here is scarier to me than actually facing someone dangerous. I push it to the back of my mind and walk out the door. I walk outside around the corner. The parking lot was sort of on the side of the store. It's super dark outside now. It's a warm summer night. I can hear some crickets. It's very calming, but I'm angry because no beef. My car is the only one in the parking lot. There is someone standing on the other side of my car. They're not even trying to hide from me or anything. They are just standing like they're looking into my window. I don't know. Maybe they can help me get some goddamn beef jerky. My boots make some noise on the pavement as I walk. This person hears me and looks up. I am pretty far away still. The car is across the lot from me. I no longer feel calm. The person doesn't look right. They don't really have a face. Basically, imagine if someone put a plastic bag over their face and sucked all of the air out. Just soft indents where the eyes should be. A deep circular hole where the mouth should be. No thanks. They start walking around the car. I already have my knife out. but I don't want to accidentally kill someone trying to pull a prank or something. This person now starts sprinting directly at me. All I can hear are the sounds of them running frantically and crickets in an abandoned parking lot with only my car. It's horrifying to think about to this day, even if it was a prank. I sprint to the right, trying to get around this guy. I'm no sprinter, but I'm so scared at this point that I run faster than I ever have before. I make it around the figure and sprint to my car. The driver's side is on the other side of the car. I get in. I do not care about the seatbelt. I had left one of my windows open a crack while driving earlier, so I can hear that this guy is incredibly close outside as I start the car. I'm not sure when exactly this happened, but I remember looking up at the store as I peeled the hell out of the lot and the lights were all off. My heart is in my throat at this point. I'm looking in my rearview mirror. I can see that this thing is still sprinting after my car. After it leaves the light of the parking lot, it's too dark to tell anymore, so I just have to hope that he stopped at some point. I drive way above the speed limit to Burney. After about 20 more minutes, I finally see another car pass. I get to Burney. Everything is normal. I get my hotel room, and then I lock the door. I push a chair up against the door, but I hardly sleep. The rest of the trip is normal. I don't mention it to my buddy. I leave extra early on the ride home to ensure that the entire drive is during the day. I go across the same road as the drive up. I never come across the store. I looked for it the whole time. What the hell, I guess. No idea what happened. I wasn't tired, I wasn't on drugs, nothing like that. I was fully awake. I have been paranoid ever since then. Any ideas what this was? Pick related. It's the area where I'm pretty sure the store was. Red is the route that I took. Blue is the area where the store should be. I can find nothing on Google Maps.